Fans had gotten to know Tony Stark over more than 10 years in the MCU, which is what made his death in Avengers Endgame so damn devastating. I'm still not over it. To garner such a response to a work of fiction is impressive, but arguably even more difficult to achieve is doing so when the audience hasn't even had a chance to get to know the deceased beforehand. Hell, some of the characters on this list were killed before anyone watching even had a chance to learn their names. So with that in mind, I am Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 heartbreaking deaths of movie characters we never even knew. Number 10, a herd of Apatosaurus, Jurassic World. Coming over a decade after the third movie in the Jurassic Park trilogy, Jurassic World brought the iconic franchise back to the big screens. And although Jurassic Park 3 was far from a critical triumph, I mean, I loved it, but whatever, Chris Pratt and co. still had some big shoes to fill. It almost goes without saying that in terms of the beasts on Isla Nublar, the new film needed something big, bad, and scary to even come close to the T-Rex and the Velociraptors from movies past. Enter the Indominus Rex, a genetic hybrid created from splicing together the DNA of both. That's quite a combination. The dinosaur was immediately posed as a threat, as it outsmarted security in order to escape. But how to make it even more intimidating? How about it taking down an entire herd of 6 huge Apatosaurus for nothing more than sport? Yeah, that is intense. When Owen Grady and Claire Dearing found the behemoth body strewn across a field, it not only showed the ruthlessness of the Indominus Rex, but it was the first time Claire truly saw these creatures as more than just assets, more than numbers on a spreadsheet. There were 6 beautiful animals laying dead, and it's hard not to be moved by that. That Indo was a monster. Number 9, the second Devons, 1917. Designed to appear as 2 long continuous shots spanning the entire 2-hour runtime, 1917 is an incredibly immersive film that forces audiences to invest in its characters immediately. Lance Corporals Tom Blake and Will Schofield were given the task of travelling across German-occupied territory in order to stop the British forces falling into a trap and losing 1,600 men of the 2nd Devons Regiment, including Blake's older brother Joseph. It was a race against time to stop such a massacre, and it was successful to a degree. Though Schofield made it to Colonel Mackenzie in time to call the attack off and save hundreds of lives, he wasn't able to save everyone. As he reached the 2nd Devons, the first wave of men were just going over the top to be slaughtered. From this moment comes the iconic scene of Schofield running across the battlefield against the waves of British soldiers emerging from the trenches to be blown and shot to pieces. Yep, you know the one. Watching Blake die from his wound was hard enough, but countless soldiers being sent to their deaths was even worse. Number 8, Beau, A Quiet Place. Before stepping into the director's chair for A Quiet Place, you'd have been forgiven for never putting John Krasinski and the horror genre together. But right from the very beginning, he proved just how well he fit. The tension in the first few scenes of A Quiet Place is undeniable. Living in a world where any noise can get you killed, the Abbott family is silent while raiding a pharmacy and essentially going into town to do their shopping. That's a dangerous trip to Tesco. However, they took their eyes off their youngest child, Beau, for just long enough for him to get a toy rocket and put some batteries in it. Uh-oh. The first real noise of the film is the playful tone the toy made, quickly followed by the horrific realization of what that meant. Beau's father, Lee, sprints towards his son, and audiences might have expected this to be a fake-out death, with him getting there just in the nick of time. Unfortunately, there was nothing fake about this, folks. It was as real as it got, as the monster reached its prey a fraction earlier than Lee did. No one could have seen such a shocking moment coming so soon into the film. I nearly choked on my popcorn that day. Now, what movie death shocked you the most? I want to know in the comments section down below, so let me know. Number 7, the first Rebel, The Hunger Games Catching Fire. As far as horrific dystopian worlds go, having to send 23 young children to their deaths every year would be bad enough. But to have it televised and turned into a spectator sport puts Pan Am up there with some of the worst. When Katniss Everdeen and Peter Mellark threatened to kill themselves at the end of the 74th Hunger Games, leaving the world without a winner, this was done in a risky bid to save their own lives. What they didn't realize, though, was that this was the spark that would start a full-on revolution across the 12 districts of Panem. It showed that the capital could be beaten. During their victory tour, Katniss and Peter were paraded in front of Panem's population. In District 11, one man raised 3 fingers in the air and whistled the same tune Katniss and Rue used in the games before the latter's death, as a sign of solidarity between the districts. And soon, the entire crowd followed. This was seen as treason, and that man, for doing nothing more than raising his hand in the air, was taken and executed. Naturally, Katniss felt the weight of guilt for the stranger's death, because he was killed for seeing her as something of a revolutionary figure. As brutal as this was, it was arguably one of the biggest mistakes the capital made, as this turned the spark of revolution into a fire. Catching fire. Get it? Yeah, get it? Good. Carry on. Number 6, The Hanged Boy, Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Though peppered with slightly darker elements of death, ghost stories, and mortal curses, for the most part, the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise was relatively light-hearted fun, based around the hijinks of the eccentric and entertaining Captain Jack Sparrow. However, as said, there were times that these movies delved into darker territory, with the opening scenes of At World's End being a key example. After the events of the first 2 chapters of the story, the heat on the pirates of the world was being turned up. Lord Cutler Beckett declared a state of emergency, and anyone found guilty of piracy, aiding someone convicted of piracy, or associating with a person convicted of piracy was sentenced to death. This led to no fewer than 28 people being hanged within the first 2 minutes of the film, until one who walked up to the gallows was a mere child, so small he needed to stand on a barrel to reach the noose. His singing bound everyone awaiting their fate, as they belted out "Hoist the Colours" together. That song still gives me chills, I will not lie. A brother and sisterhood they may have been, but the singing still didn't stop the young boy from being killed with the rest. If you're finding this look at devastating deaths of movie characters we never even knew quite interesting, then get that finger, tap subscribe, and you'll find even more fascinating What Culture videos on your screen soon enough. Number 5, Theodred, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Audiences cried when Gandalf died. Audiences cried when Boromir died. And audiences even cried when Gollum died. Well, I did. However, one of the most emotional deaths in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy came for a character that barely made a physical appearance on screen. During Saruman's attack on Rohan during The Two Towers, Theodred was mortally wounded and shortly died. He was mourned by Éowyn, but his father, King Theoden, was at the time under the influence of Saruman's poison by way of Grima Wormtongue, and had no knowledge of exactly what was going on. When Gandalf freed Theoden from his spell, it wasn't long before he asked about his son, only to find out that he had been killed in battle. Not only the heir to his throne and kingdom, but his only child. I mean, it was heart-wrenching to see Éowyn grieve at her cousin's passing, but to see Theoden crumble, was something else. This was all about the immaculate performance of Bernard Hill, who so poignantly portrayed going through every parent's worst nightmare in burying their own child. Such a good scene. Gets me every time, man. Number 4, Dani's Family, Midsommar. With his follow-up to the creepy and unnerving Hereditary, Ari Aster's Midsommar doubled down on making audiences about as uncomfortable as physically possible. There are some moments in this film that are genuinely difficult to watch, and almost all of the main characters are ultimately killed before the credits roll. No one that Dani traveled to Sweden with lived long enough to leave again. The murders of the likes of Mark, Josh, and Christian were brutal and disgusting, but the first deaths of the picture were those of Dani's family, and it was truly upsetting. Midsommar opened with firefighters discovering the corpses of not only Dani's sister Terry, but also their parents. Terry was mentally unstable, and her sister had been trying to reach her before she took to flooding the entire house with carbon monoxide. Dani naturally reacted how anyone else would, in that she was unspeakably crushed by the news. Florence Pugh, she is just an incredibly talented actor, and her guttural cries and screams brought to the opening scenes an undeniable level of emotion that may not have been there otherwise for the deaths of 3 characters the audience had never even been introduced to. Number 3, Martin Vanger's Unseen Victim, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The question at the heart of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo revolved around something of a locked room mystery on a bigger scale. Harriet Vanger disappeared from Hedestad Island 40 years ago while the only potential exit was blocked off by a huge road accident, and no body had washed washed ashore from the sea. However, beyond the initial question of what happened to Harriet was a deeper issue surrounding the manipulation and abuse of women, something that Harriet's brother Martin was guilty of more than most. When Michael Blomqvist arrived at Hedestad in order to look into what happened to Harriet, he was welcomed by Martin. The man even invited the small community's newest resident over for tea one night. Of course, this was before the journalist realized what a monster he was, with the horrifying truth of that being revealed much later. You see, Martin liked to find immigrant women who had come to Sweden with no family and who wouldn't be missed, lock them up in his dungeon, and torture them before dumping their corpses in the ocean. Not a nice guy. What had to hurt Michael more than anything was that the very night he was round sharing moose steaks and wine with Martin, there was a young girl locked underneath them, who would never see the light of day again. There was even an audible, muffled scream, but Martin passed it off as a window being left open, and it was never thought of again. Horrifying stuff. Number 2, Kathy and Kora, The Green Mile. As would be natural for a film based on death row, The Green Mile saw its fair share of deaths. 3 sentences were carried out throughout the events of the film, including Percy Wetmore's horrific sabotage of Dell's execution, and of course the killing of the innocent John Coffey himself. However, arguably the hardest death to take was that of the 2 young girls Coffey was accused and convicted of killing in the first place. Found cradling the blood-soaked bodies of Kathy and Kora Deterick, Coffey said that he tried to take it back, but it was too late. He wound up on the mile not long after. The death of these 2 innocent girls was heartbreaking enough when it seemed as though they were killed by Coffey, but the truth was so much worse. The big man was one of life's miracles and had the power to heal. When he said he tried to take it back, he meant what Wild Bill Wharton had done to them. Bill had threatened each twin that he would kill the other if they made any noise as he assaulted and murdered them. He killed them with their love for each other, something that Coffey was ultimately killed for. The murder of 2 innocent girls, particularly in such a brutal way, with an innocent man taking the blame for it, was simply cruel. Number 1, The Nameless Little Boy in Bruges. With a CV boasting the likes of 7 psychopaths, 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, and the Banshees of Inisherin to his name, Martin McDonagh has gone far beyond proving that he is a master of dark comedy. However, there may be no darker moment in his entire career than in Bruges. Now, it would take a lot to make a comedy about 2 hitmen in hiding after a job gone wrong, and even more to make audiences sympathetic towards the killers, but this is what In Bruges somehow achieved. Even with the story surrounding the death of an innocent child. After being brought into Harry's operation by Ken, Ray's first job was to kill a priest. With the target standing in a doorway, Ray unfortunately couldn't see what was on the other side of him, and one of his bullets pierced straight through the man he was hired to kill and caught a young boy in the temple. The name of the victim was never even given, but seeing him lying next to the priest was haunting, and unsurprisingly followed Ray around for the rest of the film. This is the reason he considered and even attempted to take his own life before Ken was able to stop him. Heavy stuff. Thanks for checking out this video today, but your YouTube journey does not need to end there. Click on another What Culture video right here and let the good times roll. Hopefully it's not as depressing as this list.